My name is Maya Torres. I'm 32 years old, and the night my mother stood up at our family's Thanksgiving dinner in front of 43 relatives and announced that I had been draining the life out of this family for years, I didn't throw a glass, didn't raise my voice, didn't give her the theater she had clearly rehearsed for. I just listened until she finished, folded my napkin, set it on the table beside my untouched plate, and walked out through the front door of the restaurant my family had built, and that I had quietly been holding together for 6 years, without a single paycheck to show for it. 3 weeks later, they were calling me 14 times a day. I stopped answering after the 5th. Before I tell you what happened after I left, I want to ask you something. If someone had been carrying the invisible weight of your family's entire operation on their back for years, and you called them dead weight in front of everyone who mattered, how long do you think it would take before that weight came crashing down on you? I found out the answer. It was exactly 18 days. By the time I drove back to my apartment in Austin that night, I had already seen the moment from 2 angles. The first was sitting at that long center table in Torres' family kitchen, the restaurant my grandmother had opened in San Antonio in 1987, and that my parents had expanded into a catering business after she passed. The second angle came from a video my cousin Becca sent me at 11:15 that night with no message attached. Just the clip. In it, my mother's voice was louder than it had felt in the room, which is saying something. She was talking about sacrifice and burden, and everything this family had given me, her hand moving in wide gestures toward the ceiling, like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. My father sat beside her and nodded slowly, the way he always did when he wanted to look thoughtful, without having to say anything accountable. My brother Dario was at the far end of the table looking at his phone. I watched it twice and then closed the app and sat in the dark of my car in the parking lot of my own apartment complex for a while. What my mother had said, stripped of the performance, was this. I had never truly contributed to this family. Everything given to me had been an investment that never paid off. I had a good job, a comfortable life, and the nerve to act superior while the rest of the family kept the business alive. If I wanted to continue being considered part of this family, I needed to start showing it in ways that actually mattered. There was applause from 2 of my aunts. I remember thinking that was the detail that would stay with me longest. The applause. What the 43 people in that room did not know, because I had never made noise about it, was what I actually did for Torres' family kitchen. My title at work is Senior Tax Compliance Analyst for a mid-size regional firm, which is a very clean way of saying that I spend my professional life reading the fine print that keeps businesses from accidentally destroying themselves. Permits, licensing renewals, tax structures, payroll compliance, health code documentation. The paperwork that looks like nothing until it is missing, and suddenly everything stops. My family knew I was good with numbers, the way people know their car has an engine, technically aware, functionally uninterested in the details. For 6 years, starting when I was 26 and noticed during a holiday visit that my parents' sales tax filings were 18 months behind, I had been doing the following without pay, without title, and without being asked more than once. I had filed and maintained the restaurant's quarterly and annual tax returns, restructured their payroll processing when the original system was flagging them for misclassification of part-time staff, handled their Bexar County Health Department licensing renewals every cycle, managed their food handler certification tracking for all 12 employees so nobody showed up to a catering event out of compliance, built and maintained their catering contract templates after a dispute with a venue nearly cost them a lawsuit, applied for and administered a small business grant through the city that funded their second delivery van, and for the past 2 years, served as the administrative contact on their commercial general liability policy, their liquor license rider, and their equipment insurance. I had not done this because anyone thanked me. I had done it because it needed doing, because I was capable of doing it, and because somewhere in my chest I still carried the version of myself that believed being useful was the same as being loved. My mother called me a burden. I drove home and I made coffee, and I opened the folder I kept on my personal laptop labeled TX Business Compliance, which was where I had backed up everything tied to Torres' family kitchen for exactly the reason that things I did quietly had a habit of becoming things nobody remembered I did. The list I started writing that night wasn't angry. It was thorough. And thorough, in this case, was worse. Health Department license renewal contact, my email. Quarterly sales tax filing login, my personal credentials. Payroll platform administrative access, my account. Catering permit renewal reminder chain, routed to my calendar. Liquor license rider compliance. Contact at the insurer, my name. City grant reporting portal, my login. Food handler certification database, managed under my professional account. Commercial auto policy for the delivery vans. Renewal notices sent to my address because I had set it up that way after the original contact email bounced during a lapse notice 2 years ago. I had not realized how much of their infrastructure existed under my name until I saw it arranged in a single document. It looked less like helping family, and more like I had become the operating system they forgot was running. I texted my friend Priya, who is the kind of person who will tell you the truth even when it costs her something. She called me back in 4 minutes. I read her the list while she listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I value most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then said, "So what you're describing is that they called you a drain on the family in front of 40 people, and your name is currently the administrative contact keeping their liquor license active." I said yes. She said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" I told her I wanted to stop pretending the list didn't exist. The next morning, I treated the situation the way I treat a client file that has been mismanaged for years and needs to be unwound cleanly. No drama, no destruction, just an accurate handoff. I drafted a message to my parents and Dario. Subject line: Torres family kitchen account and contact transitions. In the body, I explained that effective immediately, I was stepping back from all unpaid administrative and compliance support roles I had been maintaining for the restaurant. I attached a document, 41 items long, detailing every account, license, renewal date, credential, and action item currently connected to my name or professional access. For each one, I included exactly what needed to happen next, who the relevant agency or vendor was, what deadlines were coming, and what documents would be required. I noted that any accounts billing to my personal card would be removed within 7 business days. I wrote it the way I would write any professional communication: clear, specific, and impossible to claim you hadn't understood. I did not mention Thanksgiving. I did not mention the 43 relatives. I did not mention the applause. I read it to Priya on the phone before I sent it. She said it sounds like something a very calm, very precise person wrote right after deciding to stop being a floor. I sent it at 8:47 in the morning and went to work. Dario called at 9:15. I let it go to voicemail. He said, "Maya, what is this email? Call me back. This isn't funny." I noticed he said it isn't funny, rather than I'm sorry, which told me everything about which direction this conversation would go if I had it. My father replied to the email with 4 words. "This is not necessary." My mother did not reply at all, which was its own kind of answer. Over the next several days, I worked through the list the way I work through anything complicated. 1 item at a time, documented, no shortcuts. I removed my card from the payroll platform billing and sent the account administrator instructions to my father's email with the subject line marked urgent and the login steps written out so plainly that a person who had never section and halved action and age tell pay for touched a computer could follow them. I contacted the health department and updated the administrative contact on file, noting that future correspondence should go directly to ownership. I set the tax filing account to read-only access for my credentials and sent the full login and password to the business email on record. I updated the insurer with a formal notice that I was no longer the designated compliance contact for the liquor license rider and that the policyholder should be reached directly for future correspondence. I flagged every renewal coming in the next 60 days in the handoff document with a highlighted note that said this deadline requires owner action before this date and listed the exact form or verification needed. I was not sabotaging anything. Everything I touched, I handed off. The document I sent them was more thorough than most transition memos I prepare for actual clients. I was simply returning responsibility to the people whose name was on the business license. On the 4th day, My Aunt Rosa called me. She had been at Thanksgiving seated 2 chairs from my mother when the speech happened. She said she had seen the email, because my mother had forwarded it to the extended family chain with the message, "Can someone talk sense into Maya?" I asked her what she thought. She said, "I think your mother is scared and she is doing what she always does when she is scared, which is find someone to blame before anyone can blame her." Then she asked if I was all right. I told her I thought I might be, for the first time in a while. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I saw you carry that business for years, Mija." I should have said something sooner. That was the first time all week my throat did something inconvenient. On day 7, the calls started. The first one came at 6:58 in the morning from my parents' restaurant manager, a woman named Greta, who had worked at Tora's family kitchen for 9 years, and who I genuinely liked and felt genuinely bad about. She did not waste time. "Maya," she said, "the payroll platform locked the pay run for Friday. Your dad says the system is broken. Is the system broken?" I stood in my kitchen with my coffee and looked out at the street for a moment before answering. "No," I said. The billing profile changed. The platform sent an ownership verification request to the email on file. "It should be in the inbox." Greta was quiet. Then she said, "Okay. Where is the login?" I told her it was in the document I had sent 8 days ago, on page 3. She said she had never seen that document. I told her I had sent it to the business email, my parents, and Dario. She said the business email had not been checked in 2 weeks. That sentence landed like a stone in still water, and the ripples kept going. 20 minutes later, my mother called. I let it ring. My father called. I let it ring. My mother called again, and this time left a voicemail that started sharp and ended in a register I had not heard from her in years, something closer to panic. "Maya, whatever point you are trying to make, you have made it. The pay run is due Friday, and we have a catering event Saturday, and I need you to fix this." That sentence was the whole family dynamic, compressed into 12 seconds. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had said in front of 43 people. Just the assumption that the machine existed to be used, and would keep running as long as you pressed the right button. I listened to it twice and added it to my file. That afternoon, the health department sent a routine compliance inquiry to the updated contact, which was now the restaurant's main line. My father did not know what the inquiry was asking for, because he had never handled a health department communication in the 6 years I had been managing them. He called the number back and apparently told the inspector the forms had already been submitted, which they had not been, because the renewal window had opened the previous week and I had not filed it this cycle. The inspector scheduled a follow-up visit. My brother reached me by calling from a number I didn't recognize on day 9. "Maya," he said, "Dad is losing his mind. The payroll didn't run, the health department is showing up, and there's a catering job on Saturday for 200 people. What do you want from us? Not what happened. Not are you okay? What do you want?" Like I was holding a room hostage, instead of having simply stopped doing unpaid labor for people who announced publicly that I was a burden. I told him the handoff document existed and had everything he needed. He said, "I don't have time to read a document right now." I said, "I know. That's the problem." He said that was not fair. I asked him which part of Thanksgiving had been fair, and he went quiet and then angry. The way people go when shame arrives before the words do. He said I was doing this on purpose, making them suffer. I told him I was returning to them exactly what they had always said was theirs. He hung up. My mother sent a text that said, "You have made your point. Now stop." I did not stop. The family group chat, which had been completely silent during and after Thanksgiving, suddenly became active again. My father posted a message about keeping family business private during difficult times. My mother wrote that some people prefer division over unity. Then Dario posted something about how stress affects everyone differently, which was the most elaborate way I have ever seen someone avoid saying the word sorry. I had muted the chat the morning after Thanksgiving and did not unmute it. Becca, the cousin who had sent me the video, texted me separately to say she had told the chat what she saw that night and asked them directly why nobody was talking about what was actually said at the table. She said the response was mostly silence and one aunt saying it was complicated, Becca said she replied that it did not seem very complicated from where she had been sitting. I called her back, and we talked for an hour. She said our Aunt Rosa had also spoken up in the family thread and asked my parents directly whether any of the things in my document were accurate. My mother had replied that the document was an exaggeration designed to make her look bad. My Aunt Rosa replied with 3 words. I watched it. Nobody typed anything for a while after that. On day 12, my father called at 9 in the evening. I answered because something in the rhythm of the call felt different. He did not open with instructions or accusations. He said, "We need you to come to the restaurant. There are things we need to go over. The Saturday event is still in danger, and Greta does not know how to reach the insurer about the rider." I almost said I had sent the insurer information on page 7 of the handoff document. Instead, I said, "Who will be there?" He said, "Family. Some of the aunts and uncles. People who can help figure this out together." I understood what that meant. The audience had been summoned again. This time I decided to show up, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because there is a difference between a story being told about you and a record being corrected in front of witnesses. Torres family kitchen on a weeknight looked the way it always looked when my parents wanted the building to argue for them. Every light on, the good tablecloths, the smell of something baking, even though the kitchen was technically closed. My grandmother's portrait was lit from below the way it only got for special occasions. If you had never eaten Thanksgiving dinner in that room while your mother announced your failures to the extended family, you might have found it warm. About 20 people were there, some from Thanksgiving, some who had only heard the version my parents had been circulating. My father stood near the host. Dario was by the bar pretending to check something on his phone. I came in, set my bag on the nearest chair, and pulled out a folder. My father opened the way he always opens difficult conversations, with procedural calm that is designed to make you feel like you are the one being unreasonable. He said, "We are here because there has been a breakdown in communication and a situation that is affecting the livelihood of this business and the people who depend on it. We want to resolve this as a family." My mother added, "We are not here to relitigate old arguments. We are here to move forward." I waited until they finished, and then I passed the first set of documents down the table. "These are the accounts, licenses, and operational systems I managed for Torres Family Kitchen as unpaid support over the past 6 years," I said. "Each item includes the dates, the relevant agency or vendor, the actions I took, and the handoff instructions I provided. I'd like to walk through the ones with active deadlines first." Nobody reached for the pages immediately. Then my Aunt Rosa did. Then her husband. Then it moved around the table the way things move when people in a room decide all at once to stop pretending. My father tried to redirect. "This isn't what we're here for," he said. "It is exactly what we are here for," I said. "Because at Thanksgiving you told this family that I was a burden and a drain. So I want to be specific about what I was taking and what I was giving, because those are not the same story." My mother's expression moved through several things quickly. She said, "Everything you did as family. That's what family does." I looked at her and asked the question I had been carrying for 12 days. "Then why did you call me dead weight in front of 43 people?" Nobody moved. I do not think anyone in that room had heard her words said back that plainly. She started to say it was an emotional moment. I passed the second set of documents around the table. "These are the direct out-of-pocket expenses I covered over 6 years when something needed to clear before I could get reimbursed, or in some cases, when reimbursement was never mentioned. The total is not enormous. That is not the point. The point is that a drain does not pay to keep the pipe running." Dario finally put his phone down. He looked at the pages the way people look at something they recognize but were hoping not to see. My father switched tactics, the way he always does when the evidence has moved past the point where denial is comfortable. He said, "Whatever the ledger looks like, taking the systems offline before a major event is not the answer. People are depending on Saturday." I told him I had not taken anything offline. I had transferred it. Every account had a handoff instruction. Every deadline had a note. Everything in that document could be picked up and run by anyone willing to read it. The systems were not the problem. The problem was that for 6 years, the assumption had been that someone invisible would keep them running, And when that person became visible enough to cause inconvenience, she got called a burden in front of the family. Aunt Rosa set her papers down and looked at my parents. She said, "I watched Maya manage licensing for this restaurant for years, and I never once heard either of you thank her for it in a room with other people. But I watched you tell 40 people she was the problem." My Uncle Hector nodded. My mother's sister, who had been quiet all night, looked at her hands. My mother reacted the way she always does when the audience shifts. She said I was enjoying this. She said I had always wanted to be the one who mattered more, who got the credit, who was appreciated in ways Dario wasn't. It would have been easier if jealousy had been the explanation. Jealousy is small enough to dismiss. I told her I had not needed more credit than Dario. I had needed any credit at all. I had needed to not be called a drain in public for work I had done in private for 6 years. Those are not the same thing. She opened her mouth, closed it. Dario slammed his hand on the chair back beside him, which startled the room, and said this was a family matter, and I was turning it into a performance. I slid the grant application across the table to him. It was 63 pages long, with my name listed as preparer on every section. I told him the walk-in cooler replacement my parents had done last spring was funded by that grant. I told him I had spent 4 weekends on the application while he was in Las Vegas for his friend's birthday. He stared at the page. He did not say anything for a long time. My father changed directions again. He said that none of this changed the Saturday event. That 200 guests were expecting food and service, and the insurer had not confirmed the liability rider for the venue. He said that Greta had done everything she could, and it was not her fault that the transition had been handled this way. He was right that it was not Greta's fault. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single stapled packet and handed it to Greta directly, not to my parents. "This is the same handoff document I sent 2 weeks ago," I said, with the urgent items highlighted and the insurer's direct contact on the first page. "Page 2 is the form the venue needs by tomorrow morning. Page 3 is the food handler certification report for Saturday's crew in case the county asks. Page 4 is the catering permit number and the contact at the city office if there's a question at the venue. Nothing in that packet requires me. It requires someone to make 2 phone calls and upload 1 form before noon tomorrow." Greta took it with both hands, and I saw her read the first page, with the focus of someone who had been waiting a week for something that made sense. My father looked at the packet, and then at me. He said, "So that's it, you just leave." I told him I was not leaving. I was returning. I was returning every responsibility that had been sitting under my name to the people whose name was on the business. I told him the restaurant could run well without me if ownership decided to run it. What it could not do was keep running on the assumption that a person who had been publicly called a burden would keep absorbing the weight in silence. My mother started crying then, not the loud kind, the tight, controlled kind that meant she was furious that the situation had not resolved the way she planned. She said I was punishing the whole family for one bad night. "One bad night," I said, repeated back to her. My Aunt Rosa looked at her sister. She said, "Carol, one bad night is when someone forgets to bring dessert." Uncle Hector laughed once, short, before he caught himself. My father sat down, something in his posture changed. Not softened, recalculated. He said, "What do you want from us, Maya?" And I recognized that question the same way I would recognize a bad contract clause. It sounds like an opening. It is actually a door to nowhere, because the answer they were hoping for was a number, a concession, a condition they could meet that would put me back in position. I told him I did not want something from them. I wanted something to be accurate. I wanted the story they had told in that room at Thanksgiving to be corrected in a room with witnesses, because that was where the story had been told. I wanted the record to reflect what the last 6 years had actually looked like, not the version where I was the taker and they were the givers. After that, the restaurant operated on whatever terms the people who owned it decided to accept. I was not their operations department anymore. The room was quiet for long enough that it became its own kind of answer. Aunt Rosa looked at my mother and said it plainly. "Tell everyone in this room what Maya actually did for this business." My mother looked at the table. Rosa said it again, without raising her voice. "Tell them." My mother was quiet. Then she lifted her head, and in a voice that still had every ounce of bitterness in it, she said that Maya had handled administrative work for the restaurant, that she had managed some of the licensing, that the characterization at Thanksgiving had been said in emotion and was not entirely accurate. Not entirely, Dario muttered, and I could not tell if he was being sarcastic or if it was the closest he could get to honesty in that room. My father said, "We acknowledge that, Maya. Now can we move forward?" I nodded once, stood, closed my folder, kept my coat on. Then I looked at Greta and told her she had my number if she had questions about page 3. She nodded. I thought she might cry, which made me think about all the ways invisible labor, when it finally becomes visible, breaks the wrong people's hearts first. I left before anyone could turn the silence into a negotiation. Priya was parked outside because she had asked to be, and I had not argued. I got in the passenger seat, and she handed me a coffee without saying anything first, which is one of the reasons I have kept her in my life for 11 years. Then she asked how it went. I told her my mother had said the characterization was not entirely accurate. Priya said not entirely is the loudest possible way to say you were right. I looked at the front window of the restaurant, the warm light, my grandmother's name still in the original font on the sign, and felt something I could not entirely name. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the specific quiet that comes after you have been holding your breath for years, and finally stop. The Saturday catering event happened. Greta ran it using the document. The insurer confirmed the rider the morning of, because the form had been submitted the day before. The county did not have questions about certifications, because the report was in order. 200 guests ate, and the staff got paid. I know this because Greta texted me after. Just 3 words. It went fine. My parents did not text me that night. The health department visit happened the following Tuesday. My father had to sit with an inspector for 40 minutes going over records he had not touched in 6 years. The restaurant passed but received a note about a documentation gap in the renewal file. The inspector told him the system needed a designated compliance contact. My father hired a part-time bookkeeper the following week and asked Greta to start handling the licensing correspondence, both of which would have been good ideas 6 years ago. By the end of the month, 2 catering clients, who had been in the family's pipeline for summer events, called to ask whether the business was stable, because they had heard from a venue coordinator that there had been some operational confusion recently. My parents confirmed they were fine and the bookings held, but the calls had been made, which meant the question existed now in a way it had not before. Dario texted me 3 weeks later. It was a long message, longer than anything I had seen from him in years. He wrote about being overwhelmed, about not understanding how much of the back-end work he had assumed was just handled, about my father not knowing where half the documents were, about realizing the reason things had always run smoothly was not because running smoothly was easy. Near the bottom he wrote, "I think I told myself you were involved because you wanted to be in control, because it was easier than admitting you were doing actual work I should have noticed. I don't know if that's an apology. I'm still figuring out what it is." I read that part 4 times, not because it fixed anything, because it confirmed everything. The family myth had never required that I did nothing. It required that what I did stayed small enough that no one had to feel responsible for letting it continue. Once it became undeniable, the myth had to change, and changing the myth meant admitting that the story they had told themselves, and at Thanksgiving to 43 relatives, was not the story that had actually happened. My mother called once more in the 2nd month. She did not apologize in any complete or useful way. She said she knew things had been said that she would not say again. She said she hoped eventually we could find our way back to something. I told her I appreciated her calling. I meant it in the way I mean most things, precisely and not more than that. My father sent a message the following week. It said, "I thought keeping pressure on you was how I showed I believed in you. I can see now that might not have been what it felt like on your end." I saved it to a folder and did not reply immediately, which I think was the most honest thing I could have done. Aunt Rosa and I have dinner twice a month now. She told me recently that at a family birthday party, someone had asked my mother how the business was going, and my mother had answered carefully, said they were making some changes, had brought in some help, were learning to delegate. Then someone had asked what Maya was up to these days, and my mother had said, "Maya is doing well. She is very capable," in a voice that had more cost in it than she probably intended. Becca sent me that second-hand account in a voice memo, with a sound at the end that I can only describe as satisfied. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I took on a new client at work, a mid-size restaurant group looking to clean up 6 years of compliance backlog. The irony was not lost on me, and I let myself laugh about it alone in my car, which felt healthy. I moved into a better apartment in the spring. I celebrated my 33rd birthday at Priya's house with 9 people who showed up because they wanted to be there, and 0 people who showed up because the food handler certifications needed renewing. Greta left Tora's family kitchen in February and took a general manager role at a hospitality group that had actual systems and a written operations manual. She texted me when she got the offer. I told her it sounded exactly right. The restaurant is still open. The summer calendar is smaller than it used to be, which I know because Becca drives past it sometimes, and reports back with the neutrality of someone who has decided to love the family without pretending the family is always good. The social media account still posts photos of beautiful food and my grandmother's story and the warmth of a family business, and those things are all true. They are just not the whole story. The whole story is that for 6 years there was someone running the part of the operation that nobody photographed, and when her mother called her dead weight in front of 43 people, she stopped. Not in anger, not in revenge. In accuracy. She returned everything she had been quietly carrying to the people whose name was on the door, and she stepped back and let reality describe the rest. The strangest part is not what happened to the business. The strangest part is what happened to me. I stopped dreaming about permit renewal deadlines. I stopped checking the health department portal at 10 o'clock on Sunday nights out of habit. I stopped measuring my value and how useful I could make myself to people who were comfortable believing they had built something without me. What my mother had called dead weight turned out to be the only kind of weight keeping the whole thing standing. When it walked out the door, they felt it. And when they finally said so, in the quietest and most reluctant ways people manage honesty, I found that I had already stopped needing them to. Sometimes, the most complete thing you can do for yourself is stop saving someone who never learned to say thank you, because they never had to. Not because you want them to suffer. Because you finally believe that your labor belongs to you. And sometimes the most powerful sentence in a room full of people who have been telling the wrong story is not an argument or a speech or a breakdown. It is a 41-item document, passed quietly around a table, that simply shows everyone who is actually doing the work.